There are people who have never truly had a break from their own mind. On the outside, they still look completely normal. Still going to work. Still answering messages. Still smiling during conversations. But sometimes, nothing has even happened. Maybe someone stays silent a little longer than usual. And their mind has already started going very far. There are people who meet someone. And the real conversation only begins when they get home. Alone. Inside their head. They remember a certain look. A very small pause. Or just the feeling that the atmosphere suddenly changed. Some people are getting ready to sleep. Then suddenly remember something they said years ago. Just a very small sentence. But their heart still sinks the same way. It sounds a little irrational. But there are feelings. The body never completely forgets. And the most exhausting part is, most people like this know they think too much. They know. Other people tell them that all the time too. Just relax. Stop overthinking. But there are people who have never known what it feels like for their mind to be truly quiet. Sometimes it is only a message that feels shorter than usual. But for the rest of that night, their mind refuses to settle down. Some people are feeling really happy. Then suddenly feel ashamed because they just talked too much. So the whole way home, they can only think about that one moment. There are people texting completely normally. Then suddenly have to turn off their phone because the shame appears too fast. It hurts to hear. Because people who think too deeply usually do not just hear the words other people say. They hear the pause between sentences. They hear the way someone replies slower than usual. They hear even the things that are not said. The most exhausting part is, people like this are often very good at understanding others. They know who is pretending to be okay. They know when someone is starting to feel tired but is not saying it. It is just that. No one sees how exhausted they are inside their own mind too. There are people who open a chat window in the middle of the night. Type a few very honest lines. Then sit there staring at the screen for a very long time. Then delete everything. Not because they do not want to be understood. But because one part of them is always afraid of feeling like they have become too much. And then, after many years, they begin to think it is just their personality. That they were born too sensitive. But maybe. Many people do not really think too deeply because they want to. Maybe they have just lived for too long in a state where every small change once led to something painful. And then one day, they no longer know what it feels like to live without analyzing everything. And then, after a while, people like this begin to feel tired around others. Not because they hate people, but because their mind has never truly stopped working. There are people sitting in a very normal conversation, while at the same time still noticing whether they are talking too much, whether their face looks strange right now. Did the atmosphere just shift? It hurts to hear. Because there are people who have never truly been able to exist naturally in front of others. Some people are laughing. Then suddenly hear the sound of their own laugh. And somehow feel ashamed. Some people tell a very normal story. Then go home and replay it all night just because they felt like they had shown too much. There are people who begin to feel ashamed. Just because they existed too clearly in a room. It sounds a little insane. But people who think too deeply often do not just live inside the moment that is happening. One part of them is always standing a little farther back, watching themselves from the outside. And the most exhausting part is, everything happens almost automatically. There are people who walk into a room and almost immediately feel something about the atmosphere is off today. Someone is a little more distant. Or maybe they are the only one who feels that way. But their mind still refuses to stop scanning everything. Some people are having a completely normal conversation. then suddenly lose focus just because they become too aware of the way they are existing. Where to put their hands. Whether their eyes look weird. Whether they are making other people tired. And that moment is always very lonely. Because from the outside, no one realizes what has just happened. Some people come home after a very fun hangout, then suddenly feel completely exhausted. Not because the conversation was too long, but because for many hours, they never truly relaxed. Sometimes someone simply treats them well, and their mind already begins asking, so when will this start to change? It sounds sad. Because when a person thinks too deeply for too long, they slowly lose the ability to trust simple things. A message that feels shorter than usual is enough to make the whole evening feel off. A silence that lasts a little too long is enough to make their heart sink very slightly. And the saddest part is, most other people will never see that. They only see someone who is a little quiet, a little overthinking. But no one sees that some people are so tired that even in the happiest moments, they are still not fully present inside them. There are people who, their whole life, have only wanted one very small feeling: to be next to someone, without constantly asking themselves, after being around me for this long, are they starting to feel tired yet? And then, after living like that too many times, many people begin to no longer fully trust what they feel. Not because they do not want to be close to someone, but because their mind always takes one more step after every beautiful thing. Sometimes someone simply treats them well, and inside their head, they are already quietly preparing for the day everything changes. It sounds sad, but there are people who have never been used to peace lasting for long. So when everything is too calm, they begin to worry. Some people are being loved deeply, but still stay awake until 2 a.m. just to think, is this person slowly getting bored of me? Did I talk too much today? They will get tired eventually too, right? It sounds a little insane. But people who think too deeply often do not wait for something bad to happen before they hurt. They begin hurting the moment they feel that things might change. From the outside, everything still looks completely normal. No one knows there are people laughing so naturally, while their mind has already started preparing for the other person to leave. Some people are lying next to the person they like, but their mind is busy noticing whether that person held them less than usual today, whether their tone sounded different, whether that silence earlier meant something. There are people who open the conversation many times throughout the day, then exit again, without sending anything, just to check whether the other person is online. It sounds both sad and embarrassing, because there are people who begin to feel ashamed, just because they miss someone more than they feel they should. And the most painful contradiction is, the more they like someone, the more they begin wanting to disappear from that person. Not because their feelings are gone, but because being seen too clearly scares them. Some people receive a very normal message, then read it again and again just to check whether the period at the end of the sentence feels colder today. Sometimes they miss someone terribly, but still force themselves to come online a little later, reply a little slower, pretend to be a little busier. As if the other person knew how much they cared, everything would begin to lose balance. It sounds exhausting, because many people who think too deeply eventually become the quietest ones about their own feelings. Not because there is nothing inside them, but the opposite. There is too much happening, to the point where they no longer know where to begin. And maybe the loneliest thing is, they are very good at understanding other people, but rarely feel that anyone truly understands how tired their mind really is. If you have ever lived with that kind of exhaustion, the kind of exhaustion that comes from always having to think a little more than everyone else, leave a dot in the comments. Because there are kinds of tiredness That only when you hear someone else say them out loud. Do you realize? You have been living with it for far too long. And then, at some point, people like this begin to no longer know whether they are living or just trying to avoid getting hurt again. There are people who go through a very normal day, but their mind has never truly stopped, not even for a few minutes. Eating. Still thinking. Walking. Still thinking. Lying down to rest. Their mind is still quietly running somewhere in the background. It sounds exhausting. But many people have lived like this for so long. They think it is just their personality. Some people are in a very beautiful moment, then suddenly get pulled out of it by one very small thought. When will this end? That is the kind of person who, even when they are happy, still never stops mentally preparing themselves to lose that happiness. Some people are being loved, but inside their head, they are secretly imagining the other person slowly becoming colder, slowly replying later, slowly wanting to see them less. And the frightening thing is, their mind does that like a reflex. Without trying. It just happens. There are people who have never truly relaxed inside anything good. Because one part of them always thinks, if I get too happy, it will hurt so much when I lose it. It hurts to hear. But that is how many people begin to live. They are no longer truly enjoying life. They are only trying to reduce the amount of pain that might happen later. Some people, before going to sleep, are already mentally preparing for conversations that have not even happened. Preparing how to explain themselves. Preparing how to be misunderstood. Preparing even how they will be okay if someone leaves. It sounds a little funny. Until you realize there are people who have never entered a relationship without simultaneously preparing for its ending. There are people who slowly stop being able to enjoy love. Because most of the time, they are only trying to guess when that love will begin to change. And that is when depth starts becoming a prison. Sometimes it is only the way someone stays silent a little longer than usual. And their mind has already started dissecting everything. Sometimes they are sitting next to the person they like, but they cannot even remember what that person just said. Because their mind is busy thinking. Am I making the atmosphere awkward? Did I just react a little strangely? Am I disappointing them? And that moment is very lonely. Because when other people look at them, they will only see someone who is a little quiet, a little withdrawn. No one sees how loud it is inside them. There are people who are so tired that the thing they want most is no longer to be understood, but just for one day. For their mind to finally become a little quiet. To stop analyzing everything. To stop preparing for every worst-case possibility. To stop living as if every moment of peace is about to disappear. And then one day, they realize they have spent too many years trying to understand life. That they have never truly felt themselves living inside it. And maybe the saddest thing is, so many people who think too deeply have spent too many years believing something is wrong with them. That they are too sensitive. Too complicated. Too hard to love. There are people who, after every time they open up, quietly sit there checking where exactly they were too much. Did they reply too fast? Did they care too openly? Did they miss that person too much? It hurts to hear. Because there are people who have lived for so long that even their own sincere emotions begin to make them feel ashamed. Some people miss someone so much, but still force themselves to act a little colder, a little less online, a little less honest. As if the other person sees how much they care, sooner or later, they will be seen as a burden. And then, little by little, that makes a person tired in a very strange way. They no longer know which feelings are truly theirs, and which version of themselves they edited to become easier to keep. There are people who spend their whole life being very good at understanding others. But they have never learned how to be gentler with themselves. They forgive other people very quickly. But one awkward moment of their own is enough to replay in their mind for years. Sometimes they look back at themselves and genuinely do not understand why they are always so tired. Until one day, they begin to realize maybe they were never really too much. Maybe they have just lived for too long in a state of constantly having to read the room, guess emotions, and prepare for everything to change. It sounds small, but for many people, that is a very big moment. Because for the first time, they no longer see themselves as a problem that needs to be fixed, but as someone who has been tired for far too long. And maybe healing for people like this does not begin with forcing themselves to think less or forcing themselves to become more normal. It begins with very small moments. One time when someone goes silent and their heart does not immediately sink. One time being next to someone without constantly watching for the moment the other person starts getting tired of them. There are people who are so tired that what they want most is no longer even to be loved, but to no longer have to think this much. And maybe that is what many people are really searching for. Not a perfect life, just the feeling of finally being able to exist without constantly shrinking themselves down anymore. If this video made you feel like someone had just described the exact kind of exhaustion you never knew how to name, leave a dot in the comments. Because there are feelings that only when you hear someone else say them out loud do you realize you have been carrying them alone for far too long.
Click the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. And be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you for being here. At Cortex Psychology, we explore the hidden patterns beneath human behavior, the thoughts you keep private, the emotions you cannot explain, and the quiet reactions that shape the way you live and connect. Sometimes, understanding yourself begins with hearing your inner world described clearly for the first time. So if this video helped you feel seen, stay with us. You do not have to decode your mind alone. We will decode it together. See you in the next one.